So I think all the plugin companies are gonna hate me for making this video, but screw it. I mean, it feels like every month there's so many new plugins coming out. Like iZotope has a new one, Waves has a new one, Baby Audio just came out with a new one, Cable Guys has a new one. I wanna ask you this, how many plugins actually come out every year that do something completely new that you couldn't do before? I mean, I've been making music for over 15 years now, and I've bought and tested so many plugins and spent so much money. I'm sure some of you guys are even worse than me. I'm sure some of you guys have over 100 plugins that you've bought. But I want to try to convince anyone that makes music not only to stop buying most new plugins. I mean, there are some obvious exceptions if a really amazing one comes out, but I want to convince you not only to stop buying them, but even to get rid of plugins that you already have, because I think it makes you a better producer and a better artist. So I've got like 8 main points I want to get to back this up, but at the end of this video, if you're still gonna spend money on anything, I'll tell you what I actually recommend doing. So the first reason to own less plugins is so you can use the sharpest knife. So what do I mean by this? Well, say you're in your kitchen cooking and you have like 20 knives to use, but none of them are that sharp. They're all like butter knives. You would happily trade those 20 butter knives for one really sharp chef's knife that can cut through anything. And that's really how you should think about your plugins. Like being able to use one compressor really well is way more important than having 20 different compressors and only having like surface level knowledge of each of those. Like every compressor reacts to audio differently, they all have different tones, but if you're forced to just use one compressor, you're gonna become an expert in that one compressor. You're gonna be able to make it do anything you want in any situation. So you can either be a master of none and just have a basic understanding of a lot of different plugins, or you can pick a select few of the most important tools and really master those and be able to have your way with them and make them do whatever you want. And that really leads me to my second point, which is about creative flow. The whole point of making music is to get ideas from your head into your computer as fast as possible. So when you learn your plugins really well, they all just become second nature to you. Like let's say I want to add some reverb to the drums in this buildup to automate some tension. Well, first of all, I don't need to waste any time picking what reverb I'm going to use. I know exactly what I'm going to use. And then I know that this mode, chamber, sounds good on drums. I don't want it messing with the transient, so I'll turn the attack and pre-delay down. I'll dampen the low end and the high end. I'll cut this off pretty intensely because I know that sounds good on drums. And then I'm pretty much done without even listening to it. So anytime you have an idea in your head, knowing your plugins really well is just gonna help you get those ideas out faster. And if you multiply this by every little decision in a song, you're gonna start making music a lot faster and you're gonna start finishing more tracks. And when you finish more tracks, you learn from those tracks. So you're actually gonna end up getting better at making music faster than you would have if you had way more plugins to choose from. And that also relates to my next point, which is the paradox of choice. When you have too many options, it's actually mentally draining. Like let's say I want to add a compressor onto a vocal. So first I got to think, well, what compressor would sound good on this vocal? And if I have a lot of options, I might use that compressor and I might say, hey, wait a second, maybe I'll try a different compressor, it might sound better. And then I'll be like, wait, no, I'll try another compressor. Having all these options literally makes your brain tired. It's taking mental capacity away from more important things like songwriting. Like any compressor is going to even out the signal of a vocal. What's more important is the songwriting and the feeling that the song gives you. What's not that important is what compressor you use. So when you have more options, you'll second guess yourself more, you'll be less happy with the decisions that you do make, and all your decisions are just going to take more time. So having more options isn't always better. All right, let's keep going. So the fourth reason I have is that using the same plugins over and over will actually help you develop a signature sound. Like let's say there's a synth sound or a certain drum pack you like to use a lot. If you use that over and over, it's not actually a bad thing, because when people listen to your music on Spotify, they'll start to recognize your sound. And that's how you really develop your own recognizable sound. And that's like the holy grail for making music. You want someone to hear your song without even seeing who it's by and be like, oh, that song's by Big Z. Like, that's the holy grail of producing music, and it's really hard to do. But one thing that can help you get there is to actually use the same plugins and sounds over and over again. It's not a bad thing. I mean, look at huge artists like Kygo and Purple Disco Machine. They both have such recognizable sounds, and it's because they use the same sounds over and over again. So try doing that in your own music, and don't worry too much about using the same plugins over and over. And another quick reason to own less plugins is it makes it easier to collab with other producers. Like, say you're sending a project file to someone else to work on. If you have like 50 different obscure plugins on there, they're not gonna be able to use it. They're not gonna have all those plugins. But if you stick to the few most popular plugins that are actually the best plugins to use, like Serum, if you're using the synth Serum, chances are that producer is also going to have Serum, and they're going to be able to work in your project file. So it does make it easier to collab too. Also, owning software is kind of a pain in the ass. You got to deal with updates, you got to manage your licenses, you got to troubleshoot technical issues when it's not compatible with the newest version of your DAW. Owning less plugins means less downtime. Like, every 5 years or so, I buy a new computer, and every time I buy a new computer, it's such a pain to transfer all the plugins over to the new computer. I'm digging through emails from like 5-10 years ago, trying to find my license keys, and I'm like resetting my password on all these random plugin websites, trying to get my licenses to make these plugins work on the new computer. It's such a pain in the ass. So if you use less plugins and you only have like 10, 15 main plugins that you love to use, then that's going to mean less downtime when you transfer over to a new computer, and just less overall downtime troubleshooting upgrades and technical issues and compatibility issues. Also, have you ever tried opening up an old project file for a song you made like a year or two ago, and just nothing works the way it should? Like, you were either using different plugins back then, or they're just old versions of the plugins that don't work with your newest computer. Less plugins means more consistency across projects. So that's the 7th reason. Now, after the last reason, I'm just gonna tell you what I would do differently if I were just getting into producing now. But the last reason is the most obvious one. It's just, when you buy less plugins, obviously, you're gonna save more money. So it saves you more money, it saves you time, and it helps you focus on what actually matters, which is writing music that connects with more people. Now, I don't want to just come out and say that all plugins are useless. Like, there are some amazing tools out there that I love using in my own tracks. It's just, there's a lot of overlap between plugins. Like, at a certain point, a lot of them can just do the same things as the other plugins. So there's a lot of redundancy when you buy more plugins. And none of this is sponsored at all, but I would recommend getting one really good wavetable synth. Like, you can make any sound you can possibly imagine in Serum. I would recommend getting one really good sampler instrument. Like, if you want a realistic brass or piano sample to play on your computer, that's when plugins like Kontakt come in, and I think Kontakt is really good for that. And I would also just recommend getting one really advanced EQ, one really good compressor, and one really good reverb. Other than that, the free stock plugins that come with your DAW are pretty amazing. They can do great things, and they can sound pretty good. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hopefully you save some money, or just think about what plugins you're buying a little more carefully in the future. Obviously, there's gonna be great plugins that keep coming out, but you don't need to buy and jump on every single one that comes out. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.